I think we're ready to start. Welcome. Very pleased to have you here at our Launchmetrics Solutions event, a series of live demos of Launchmetrics products. And today we'll be talking about enhancing your brand performance to keep up with the beauty consumer. So my name is Alex. I'm the business marketing executive here at Launchmetrics. And with me today, I actually have two people, which I'm very excited about. I have Bo, our global product marketing director, who will dive deeper into our recently released Business of Beauty report. So hi, Bo. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And we also have Mohini, our strategic account director, who will walk you through Launchmetrics insights and show you all the nitty-gritty of our data. So hi, Mohini. So good to have you here as well.
Hi, everyone.
Great. Well, let's quickly go through the agenda and we'll be switching things up a little. So if you joined our previous demo, it's going to be a little bit different. But as always, we're going to start with a very brief introduction to Launchmetrics for those of you who are with us for the first time. Then we'll dive into the results of our Business of Beauty report, which I hope you had a chance to download already. But if not, we'll share with you afterwards. Then we'll move to the key challenges faced by professionals in the industry. Next up, Mohini will walk you through our Insights platform. And then finally, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So feel free to pop any that come to mind in the chat. Right, let's kick off. For those of you who don't know us, Launchmetrics is the leading brand performance cloud for fashion, luxury, and beauty. We work with over 1,200 clients from the fashion, luxury, and beauty industry, as well as some key partners, some of which you can see on the left-hand side here. And some of you, our clients, joined us here today. So I'll be brief as we know each other already. Great, so Launchmetrics is twofold. On one side, we help brands be more efficient. We help them digitize internal processes that they already have. And then on the other side is tracking their marketing activities. So tracking their strategies and leveraging data and insights so brands can better understand the performance of what they've been doing. And so today we'll be focusing on just that, the metric side of things, with a special focus on beauty. So that's very quickly about us. We don't want to bore you too much, and I know you're waiting to see the nitty-gritty of our data. But before we do that, I want to quickly get into our methodology so that we know what we show you makes sense. So first of all, let's talk about media impact value. If you read publications such as the New York Times or WWD, Glossy, or Vogue Business, you might have seen it already. So media impact value, MIV in short, is essentially a metric that assigns a monetary value to every post, every campaign, every article, and helps our customers understand what's working and what isn't. So MIV is ultimately a monetary representation of brand performance. So MIV can work across all channels, right? So we have print, we have social media, we have online. So you can really compare apple to apple, and MIV works across voices as well. But what are voices? And I realize we use that term quite often, and I'm sure it will come up multiple times today. You can count, maybe have a sip of coffee every time we say voices, but I'm not responsible for your level of caffeine in your blood. So let's explain voices a little bit. So beyond the media impact value algorithm at Launchmetrics, we developed something called a voice-centric approach. So we believe that there are 5 voices that really influence consumer path to purchase. And by using a voice-centric approach, brands that we work with, they're able to better understand what, and more importantly, who is driving that brand performance. So is it celebrities? Is it media, influencers, partners, or your owned media? So owned media is everything that you're doing on your own social media channels. So it's quite simple, really, but it will become key when we look at the voice split and when we compare which voices beauty brands leverage most often. So I hope I was quite quick now that we have all the knowledge that we need and we know, what we do and how we use it. And before we jump into the solution itself, we really wanted to highlight some of the key findings from the beauty industry coming from our Business of Beauty report to help you keep up with the beauty consumer and help you strategize for 2023. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Bo.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm really excited to be here to share some of the highlights from our inaugural Business of Beauty report. And we really looked into the entire ecosystem. We reviewed over 700 brands, 740 to be exact, actually, and their ranking and their performances and their respective MIV. So we wanted to showcase some of the highlights, but I wouldn't spoil it too much because I'd love for everyone to download the report Because actually we've done something very different for this report. Once you download a report that has all the insights and our case studies, you will also be able to download an Excel file that encompasses all of the data of all 740 beauty brands and their respective performances and their ranking. So I'd highly, highly encourage everyone to download the report. So let's jump right in. There are a few themes that I'd love to touch upon. First one being that beauty, especially, it's a very fragmented and a nuanced industry. When it comes to different MIV voices, we see that in fashion, it's still pretty traditional. Media as a voice plays still a very important role within the luxury fashion industry. However, when it comes to beauty, we see a pretty much even split worldwide. We see that influencer plays a bigger part in driving MIV for the beauty industry. And that trend actually gets amplified further when it comes to China. When we look at China specifically for the beauty industry, over 75% of MIV is driven by influencers alone. So it really is to say there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and you have to think about different channels, voices, and regions to be able to craft the right campaigns and the messaging, so forth, in the industry. And what else? Social media is the most important channel in driving MIV for the beauty industry. And when we double click into each platform, we see that, yes, Instagram still remains to be the #1 in driving reach, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're driving growth. Year over year, actually, the total MIV being generated by Instagram and YouTube has actually seen a decline. However, on the flip side, shorter form video platforms like Douyin and TikTok has been growing pretty significantly year on year. TikTok specifically has been a beauty destination for content consumption and resonance, and they have grown over 176% year on year, while some of the other platforms are struggling. And then when it comes to efficiency, I'd also like to point that out, that TikTok and Douyin does over-index and outperform when it comes to efficiency metrics such as average MIV per placement. So yes, social media is still very important, but I think the nuances and the landscape overall is shifting. Finally, one of the other overall themes I'd like to touch upon is celebrity brands. We've seen a lot of press around celebrity brands this year, especially when it comes to the death of celebrity brands. It's been really interesting this past 2 years. We've seen an influx of celebrity partnerships and brand launches. And it's not to say that celebrity brands, it's been with us for decades, but I see that the barrier to entry has really disappeared this past 2 years. But also that doesn't mean that they're all doing really well. Actually, it's the opposite. Most of the celebrity brands actually have seen a decline in their total MIV year on year. And there's one exception, which is Kylie Cosmetics, that have seen an increase in their total MIV by over 39% year on year. So really kind of the only shining star driving growth for its parent company, Coty. A lot of her success really hinges upon her own content that's really evergreen. She does a lot more posts compared to other celebrity founders such as Rihanna or Huda and so forth. So I wanted to touch upon some of these main themes. And as I said earlier, when you download the report, you'll be able to access all of the ranking and the respective MIV. But I wanted to quickly showcase the top brands that made it into the top 10. So when we look at the top 10 beauty brands by MIV for the first half of 2022, we see a lot of usual suspects. Dior was #1, driving over 388 million in MIV just in 6 months. And what's really impressive is that they also grew year on year, growing over 8%. And their performance and success really is thanks to one person. This K-pop celebrity called Jisoo Kim has been really dominating engagement and region impression within the beauty industry overall. L'Oreal Paris came in second, one of the few, very, very few mass price point brands that have performed really well in our report. They have particularly done well in China, especially when it comes to Chinese platforms such as Douyin. Across the board within the top 10, you see other L'Oreal Group portfolio brands, as well as Estee Lauder portfolio brands, and a lot of color heavy brands as well. Brands such as NARS and Charlotte Tilbury has been in number 7 and 8. And Tilbury especially has been doing really well, growing over 20% year on year. So I wouldn't spend too much time because I'd love for everyone to download the report. And before I pass it along to Mohini to walk you through the software, I wanted to quickly go through some of the major challenges that we see within the industry. Number one, it's the lack of competitor data. You know your brand the best, you have your own data, but I think when it's challenging is understanding how you stack up versus your peers and within the overall industry. Number two is proving ROI. It's always really difficult, but I think it's especially challenging when it comes to brand building activities and branded campaigns. So when it's not product campaigns, and if you're trying to build your brand, how do you understand and prove your return on your brand campaign investment is one of the other key challenges that we see. Last but not least is increasing number of channels, voices, and countries you have to manage. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have to worry about TikTok and we didn't have to worry about spending so much resources and time in managing influencers and seedings and so forth. Really, the beauty industry changes at a rapid pace. So keeping up with the trends and changing platforms and voices mix is another key challenge that we see. So that's basically why we're here, so that we can walk through how we can solve some of these challenges and address them with our tool. So with no further ado, I'll hand it off to Mohini, and please feel free to take it away from here.
Hi, thank you so much, Bo. So I am about to share my screen, and thanks, Alex, as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I am just going to minimize. Just give me a second. The bar here. So can everybody see my screen? Everything looks good? We're good to go? Okay, so before I kind of jump into the platform itself and of course the data, we're all here to see the data and the different insights that we can gather from this platform. I do want to reiterate two things. So the first thing is one of the challenges that Bo just mentioned for the industry. So we understand that there's a lack of competitive benchmarking data out there, especially when it comes to a cross-channel analysis. So our Insights platform, what is our Insights platform? It's a platform that allows you to have a strategic benchmarking tool to really understand how you stand against your competitive set of data that you give us, so your competitors, but also the industry. So the Insights platform is really going to allow you to have a macro view of your position within the industry, but also against your competitors, and then allow you to gain more granular insight into what's working and what's not working, and then for you to basically improve your ranking and your overall brand performance over time. So that's essentially the use case when it comes to utilizing the Insights platform. And before I jump into the data, I really want to just also explain the different views that you're going to be seeing throughout my demo here, because that's really going to help you see how you would be utilizing the platform if you were to work with us on a future project on our platform. So we have 3 tabs that I'm going to be focusing on mainly today. So the first one is benchmark. So this is really going to be a starting point or overview, if you will, of you against your defined list of competitors, but then also allows you to kind of go through these different voices to have a more specific understanding of how that voice is driving your overall media impact value and how that's also impacting your competitors. So that's basically a starting point, if you will, for you to utilize the tool. And that's what I would suggest all brands to start with. And then we can go into, and I will go into brands focus, which is really going to allow you to give you an understanding of your brand performance as a brand, what's working in terms of your brand campaigns, your brand activations, your marketing initiatives, what's working. I can have an overview of my brand, but also my competitors, and again, against the 5 different voices that we mentioned. And then finally, the voice focus is really going to allow you to understand how each voice is playing against me, but also my competitors. So this is going to be really essentially interesting for you to understand and maybe even discover like specific voices that you may not have ever heard of, understand that voice, what type of brands do they normally work with, or brands that they actually cite, and then understand their average MIV that they're driving overall. So that could be some sort of discovery for you, if you will, to understand how can I increase my brand performance by utilizing the specific voice in the specific region and on the specific channel. So that's essentially the journey that we'll be taking with you today. So let's get started into the data. So I've selected a time frame very, large here from January to September of this year. I'm going to be looking across all voice types. Again, I want to have a starting point, so I don't want to, splice the data just yet. I kind of want to have an overview. I'm going to be looking at these 10 different brands that we have selected. For all intents and purposes, we kind of selected color cosmetics, specifically prestige color cosmetics brands today. I'm also going to be looking at all channels, but if you wanted to, you could also, of course, splice the data in regards to, the specific channel analysis that you wanted to do. And then, of course, in terms of location, we're going to be looking at this from a global perspective, although you could potentially select a region or even a specific country, for example, Australia, and then click apply, and then the data would change here below. So we see that the selection, based on the selection of brands here, which, by the way, this selection of brands could be based off of your, of course, like Bo said, you guys know your competitors more than we do. So you can give us 9 competitors, and then it would be your brand. We potentially start with, you can have 50 brands in a project if you start a project with us, but when you would be viewing it through the platform, you view it by 10. So we've selected these brands here. So you can see the brand, you can see the ranking. So we've got 10 here. You see the MIV generated for Lancome. You can see across how many placements and then the evolution. So we can see Charlotte Tilbury, a brand that was mentioned by Bo early on, is doing significantly well this year. They have jumped up 2 slots. This is what that evolution marker means. So they'd probably be a brand to keep an eye on if they are in your competitive set for next year. And so we'll also kind of dive deep into what Charlotte Tilbury is doing to basically keep this ranking or to earn this ranking. And that's the goal, right? To use this platform to figure out what they're doing right and adjust your strategy along the way to, climb up this ladder, if you will. On the right, we have our share of value chart that basically is a pie chart of what you see from the left here. And of course, you can see that through MIV, or you can also see it through the number of placements. Below, we have our media impact value evolution. So this would be, for me, a great chart to use from a month perspective. So like, let's say, especially if you're going to be looking at content strategy. So let's say I want to understand my content strategy. I really want to prep it for the, next month or the next quarter. I can select the specific months that interest me. I can look at the brands that are most significant to me. So as you can see, I had barred a couple of brands here because it's a bit too noisy and I don't want to, go through their data. For me, essentially, I really want to look at what NARS, Charlotte Tilbury, YSL are doing. Those are the brands that I'm more interested in. So I'm going to kind of, click on some peaks here to understand what's driving the overall MIV for Lancome. Just give it a second. It's going to load. And the way we view our data in our Insight platform, we basically show you the top 30 placements by MIV. So what we're not doing is showing you everything. That isn't the purpose of our methodology, nor the purpose of utilizing insights in our platform. We really want to show you, once again, the interactions that are really driving your brand the most value. So what we're going to show you are the top 30 placements by MIV for you, instead of, as opposed to everything that was generated in the month of May, or for if we were looking at a month view, like on a specific day. I'm sorry, but it's taking a little bit of time here to load. But essentially what you would be seeing is a list of the different placements across which voice. Then you would see the channel, you would see the potential reach, the engagement rate, and on the far right would be the media impact value. Oh, here we go. So like I said, you have the date, you have the voice type, you have the channel, you have the potential reach, the engagement rate, and MIV. So here I could take a look at, for example, in terms of posts, in terms of content strategy, what's working, what are they communicating, and I can click on the post. Everything is clickable, and go to the platform itself and see what was actually posted that day. So I can see that this influencer, for example, am I right to say she's an influencer? Yes, not a celebrity. She was, talking about Lancome. Apparently, it looks like a press trip. So she mentioned Lancome here. So this would be basically a way for you to, essentially look at the content and understand, what your competitors are doing. The voice mix benchmark is basically a way for you to understand which voice is bringing the most value to your brand. So if you are, I don't know, head of brand communications or head of marketing at the beauty brand that you work with, essentially, this is where I would want to start with for figuring out my strategy for next year, because I want to understand, okay, where I sit against my competitors and which voice is bringing me the most media impact value, and then understand what I need to do in terms of activations for next year. So not surprisingly, we see that the influencer voice is driving the most media impact value for beauty brands. It's not super surprising, but we do see some like media voices, but also some own media here that's driving a lot of value for the brands. So let's say that as a brand, you have, in terms of your marketing investment in dollar, your, top executive team really want you to utilize and leverage your own media, but that your own media isn't as strong as it should be compared to your competitors. That would be a starting point for you to work on, or a goal towards for next year. And we're going to dive into that in a little bit too. So this would be a great way to look at, okay, where do I sit? Which voice is driving the most, brand performance for me? I know it's going to be influencers, but where could I maybe essentially improve too? The channel mix benchmark actually starts out looking like this. So we look at print, online, and social. So again, not surprisingly, the social media platforms are what is driving the most media impact value for brands today. But if I wanted to have a more detailed breakdown, I can. I can see, okay, across online, I can see what's driving that value across the different social media platforms. So we do work with Western and Chinese social media platforms that would include Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. So TikTok is our latest social media platform that we have connected with and that we're retrieving data from. And we're going to be growing significantly our coverage when it comes to the profiles that we're following on TikTok in the coming months, because notably what Bo was mentioning, we can see that the traditional social media channels like Instagram and YouTube are in decline year over year. So we know that it's where TikTok is where there's a lot of engagement and growth for beauty content today. So I can see that if I'm Lancome, for example, it's pretty interestingly divided. We can see that a huge amount is actually coming from Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. We can see that there's also a little bit coming from YouTube, 16% is coming from Red, 16% is coming from Instagram, which is considerably, let's say, I wouldn't say low, but a lot less than, let's say, Huda Beauty, where 54% of our media impact value is coming from Instagram. So it's a pretty, I won't say even split, but interesting take when it comes to their marketing investment and strategy versus maybe some other brands here where they're focusing heavily on like the old school, the OG social media platforms when it comes to beauty, such as YouTube, for example. And then finally, when we talk about the benchmark overview, we have this chart, which we call the brand efficiency benchmark. There's no right or wrong position to be in this chart here. It's essentially a quality versus quantity chart. So we're looking at, am I going to be activating, it's my strategy to be activating my exposure everywhere. So I'm not really looking at the quality. I just want to be, mentioned everywhere as much as possible because that's my strategy. Versus maybe I want to limit that quantity and really focus on like, niche and specific profiles to associate my brand with. So a clear example would be Charlotte Tilbury here. We can see that they've generated a total MIV of 283 million across 77,000 placements with a average MIV per placement of 3.68K. Versus, let's say, Fenty Beauty, where their MIV per placement is 5.12K and their total MIV is 260K. So there's no real, like I said, winner when it comes to this chart. Essentially, what you want to focus on is the bigger the bubble in terms of MIV, essentially is the better. So let's say that your focus is to really focus on, improving your own media, like this is something that we need to look at our marketing investments more closely. We need to be really smart when it comes to our strategy, and we need to leverage our own media a bit better, right? So we need to make some improvements and learn from maybe our competitors and see what they're doing. I would be selecting benchmark own media and then, click apply. And then normally everything changes. As you can see, the ranking is not the same. Instead of Lancome, we have Fenty Beauty on top, and then we have other brands that have moved up, such as YSL Beauty, Bobbi Brown, and Urban Decay, and other brands have moved down because these brands are doing better when it comes to their own media. So if I wanted to look at what they're doing essentially when it comes to own media, I could maybe look at YSL, for example, and try to understand, okay, what their strategy is when it comes to their own media. And it seems like they're leveraging specific regions. It would be essentially France, but also a specific channel, which is their Instagram channel. So if I wanted to kind of gain some insight as to which own media is generating the most value for my competitor, that's something that I can do. What's really interesting here is that you can see Lancome and Charlotte Tilbury. There are others as well, but I kind of wanted to focus on them. They have a very, once again, unique own media strategy. 23% of their own media is only coming from Instagram as opposed to the rest of the players here. So that's really interesting. And they're leveraging more their YouTube channel to drive a lot of MIV, but also their Facebook community or their Facebook channel. So when we look at what Lancome is doing on YouTube, I found it really interesting. I just needed to load because they were essentially leveraging different regions across YouTube. So I could see that their top 30 placements by MIV was the United States, but there's a lot of, Thailand, there's some Italy in there. Hong Kong is also in there as well as the UAE and France. So it's pretty well-rounded, if you will. And so I found it interesting that they were leveraging the YouTube channel. So you can't, I guess one size doesn't fit all. in terms of approach. So that's what I would gain as an insight here to maybe leverage another channel if I can to engage a lot with my community when it comes to my own media. Now, of course, many of you here today are also focused on influencers and your influencer marketing strategy. Of course, it's beauty, and that is the voice that is potentially bringing you the most media impact value. We just went through it in the beauty report. We just saw it in the overview as well. And here I've selected benchmark influencers, and the ranking has once again changed. So I can see that Lancome and NARS and Charlotte Tilbury are the top 3 players here when it comes to influencers, and I can really understand a bit more. And what's great about the benchmark influencers tab is that it allows you to see the data in regards to the different tiers that we showcase here at Launchmetrics. So when we're going to look at the influencer voice, we're going to look at it via different tiers. So that would be micro influencers, mid-tier influencers, mega influencers, and all-star influencers. So which influencer category are my competitors most earning the most MIV from, and therefore maybe activating the most as well when it comes to their marketing campaigns. So Charlotte Tilbury is number 3, and so is NARS is number 2. So if I wanted to look at who they're working with, who they're activating, let's say, if you will, we can use the word activating, quote unquote. I can see the top 30 placements by MIV. Once again, this is not going to show maybe influencers that NARS is specifically working with, because we do show sponsored posts when it's an estimated sponsored post. If the influencer is mentioning that there's a collaboration with the brand. So that's the only way we're able to capture if there's indeed a collaboration. And normally it's going to be viewed here. Once again, I'm really sorry, but yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. So we can see that the top post for NARS came in March from a specific influencer called Bailey Sarian on YouTube in the United States. And we can see that generated over 515K of media impact value. And yes, we can estimate that it was sponsored. So this chart is really, truly helpful because we can really deep dive into the data and gain some insights into the type of maybe influencer or influencer strategy that your competitors are doing. And then finally, we also have the channel mix benchmark here. That's really interesting when it comes to influencers. Which channel am I gaining the most? Am I gaining my most, my MIV? So which channel, when it comes to influencers, is driving my media impact value? So very interestingly enough, we see a lot of red, which means this is a lot of YouTube, which is the traditional social media OG platform for beauty brands. But we can also see Instagram as well. So this is really interesting because you could kind of click on the data and go through the post. I won't go through Douyin actually because that's in Chinese, but you would have to have somebody from your team that speaks and reads Chinese. But basically you can go through the data here and understand, okay, who's mentioning my brand on those channels. Now let's go through brands focus, because I'm looking at time and I want to make sure we have enough time for questions and the rest of the things I want to show you in the platform. So once again, the first challenge is understanding your competitive ranking, lack of data when it comes to competitive ranking across 3 channels. We've covered that with the benchmark tab through insights. And now we want to understand the potential ROI of brand campaigns and how, what initiatives I'm taking as a brand and what initiatives my competitors are taking as well, and what can I gain from there. So the first thing you'll see, so I've selected NARS here as an example, is the media impact value that I've generated in this time frame against this specific number of placements, and then the MIV per placement. This map here is basically a heat map. So this allows you to kind of gauge which location or market is generating the most MIV for me. Here for NARS, it's essentially the US, but also China. And then we can also see some other countries mentioned here. We can also see the voice mix, my media impact value. These two charts are really interesting for me. I'm going to really quickly go over it before I go to the channel mix here below. So we can see that for most brands, the influencer voice is where they're getting the most media impact value. However, we can see on the right that when we look at the overall evolution of these different voice mixes, it's actually media that's generating a lot of value also for the brand. So if I'm looking at what my investment strategy should be for next year, okay, it's a sure bet to continue with, putting my marketing dollars towards influencers, but it might not be a bad idea to invest in media or even partners, because I can see that these voices are also generating a lot of value over time for my brand. So partners would be like e-retailers for those of you in the beauty industry. So that could be like Sephora's, Ulta's, Marionneau, Nocibe, so like specific e-retailers here in the French ecosystem, but also your specific main e-retailers like Sephora and Ulta. And then if I also wanted to understand, my investments, let's say the tool is also meant to be for you to make agile, strategic decisions. So although it helps you to plan for really well for next year, and next year's coming up, this also allows you to pivot your strategy too. So let's say that if we were looking at a month or a quarter, this would look maybe a little bit different, and it would help you to maybe figure out what changes you might want to make for the next quarter or the next month, if you will. Because here I'm basically seeing the investments I'm making, and the breakdown, the allocation of that investment, and then the MIV associated, essentially. So if I'm putting 28% of my placements, my media, I'm putting 28% of my placements are coming from the online channel, but the online channel is only driving me 17% of my media impact value. I might want to adjust that a bit moving forward, because I shouldn't be investing that much. I should be investing a little bit less compared to, for example, YouTube. I'm not investing that much. Understandably why, because a lot of people are seeing a little bit of fatigue when it comes to YouTube, but it might make a little bit of sense to maybe continue to increase a little bit of investment when it comes to that channel, because I can see that it's still bringing 22% of my media impact value today. And then another chart here that's super useful, depending on the lens that you're looking at it through. So if I'm NARS and I'm looking at this chart, this could be really key, because I can see the key voices that are generating my overall value today. So it could be interesting, because Cosme, what's Cosme? I don't know. I've never heard of them before. And if I wanted to look at their profile, I could. And basically, I am then directed to the voice focus here, and I can see what this voice is. It's online and social. I can see their biggest presence is mainly online media, and then I can see more other interesting metrics that could be interesting for me. So another example would be, I think I had selected this person here earlier. Yeah, I selected Karen. I have never heard of her before, but I can see that she generated a lot of value for NARS. So I want to see who she is. Okay, she seems to be an influencer from Brazil, with a YouTube community of over 2.69 million. And I can see, this is what's the most interesting, the brands that the influencer is posting about and how much media impact value is it generating against. So I can see my competitive set. So I can see Urban Decay, Fenty Beauty. I can see these brands that she's mentioned, and I can see how many times and the overall subsequent media impact value. So let's say I am NARS, and I know how much, investment I provided this specific influencer. I could potentially give you, like, I could potentially figure out the ROI here in a drop of a hat. So this is where that tool, this graph is really, really essential, because you as a brand, you know where your investment is going, you know what influencers you're activating. So this chart is really useful to see, okay, in terms of MIV, is she really bringing me a lot of MIV? But it's also interesting to utilize this chart because let's say you never heard of this influencer before, you're looking into NARS because NARS is a competitor. You see that this person is highly ranked when it comes to the top 10 key voices. You are discovering this voice and you see that this person not only talks about NARS, but talks a lot about Huda Beauty, talks a lot about Fenty Beauty, so some of your competitors. So this is also a voice that could potentially become a new voice for you to engage with or activate, or to keep an eye on, to make sure that when you're gifting, for example, maybe you would want to gift them some of your products because you want to be sure you're increasing your number of channels and voices and regions, your overall reach when it comes to your marketing initiatives and strategies for next year. I just want to understand where we are for time. Alex?
Yeah, we have about 4 more minutes, unless you guys are happy to stay on.
Okay, I'll be really quick. The voice focus really also allows you to look at, for example, I took the example of Allure and understand, okay, this is a media. They also have their print publication, but they're also, have social media. They have a social media presence, the average MIV that they're generating and their average engagement rate. And then I can see, how much media impact value that media specifically is bringing to me, but also to my competitors. So essentially, just like the influencer voice focus that I was just showing for that Brazilian influencer, but also you could do that for print as well. And then I also wanted to showcase something very new and interesting that's coming up. This has to do with our beauty categorization. So I've selected a different, competitor set here and different brands. So this is a lot different from the other brands that we had before. And just to show you, you are able to then, click on makeup and then essentially click on like a specific product if you wanted to. But for all intents and purposes, because we don't have a lot of time and because this is going to be launching, I think rather fairly soon in the next coming weeks or so, the ability to benchmark your MIV based on product category. So this is really essentially great because if I am a brand that has, different, business categories like makeup, skincare, and fragrance, I can now look at my MIV generated by by category. So essentially, if I wanted to look at Glossier and their placements for MIV for skincare, that's something that I could do. I won't wait for this to load. But I will essentially stop sharing my screen and hand it over back to Alex because we've run out of time for today.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Mohini. That was very comprehensive. We have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to see what questions we have here and how many we can answer. Right, so one person is asking, can I use this platform to understand how partners like Sephora help my brand? I don't know, Mohini, if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, so I didn't get a lot of time to really showcase that in the platform, but I kind of briefly glossed over that. The platform allows you to see, partners is a voice that we follow. So essentially you can see how partners like Sephora is potentially potentially driving your MIV. So how are they mentioning your brand? Are they, is Ulta mentioning your brand? So you could see these different retailers and, behind the scenes, see how much or how often they're generating MIV for you, but also in relation to your competitors. So if that's for example, a conversation that you would want to have down the line with the specific retailer, that's something that you could do and leverage, because you have access to the data. You can see how many times they're mentioning, for example, your competitor versus yourself, and you can see the overall media impact value they're driving for them. And you can utilize that in your conversations to say, hey, it would be great, I mentioned on your website for the top, product launch for my, new lipstick line, but it would be great if you could also feature me on your, online channels too, on your social channels too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Mohini. I think we have maybe time for one more question. So I don't know if Mohini wanted to answer this one as well. Does your platform look at Weibo and Douyin? Yes,
we do look at, so we look at the 5 Chinese social media platforms. So we're looking at Weibo, WeChat, Bilibili, Douyin, and what's the other one I'm forgetting? And Red, Little Red Book. Thank you, Bo. So we're looking at all those 5 social media channels. For those of you who don't know, Bilibili is essentially like the Chinese YouTube.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for the time. We don't want to keep you too much. Thank you so much for staying the 45 minutes with us. It was my pleasure to be your host. And thank you so much, Bo and Mohini, for joining and for walking us through the data and the platform. It's really good to have you here. If you have any more questions or would like to schedule a one-to-one where we can really dive deeper into your own brand and your own set of competitors, feel free to email us. We're always here to help, so reach out. And I guess that wraps up our last live demo of the year. So thank you so much. Have a great week and we'll see you next year. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.